Okay, so we're back discussing Andor season 2 now, and four arcs, four slices. And the first one, have you guys read Doris Lessing, The Good Terrorist? Anyway,
No.
it was this book that I read in my 20s, and it was about basically like it was about activists in the Britain in the 70s, I guess. And it was like this woman hates activists, you could tell. But like she really gets them too. So it was a very painful read because like, nobody wants to cook, nobody wants to
Mm.
clean, nobody wants to like deal with sewage or like, fix the house they're all living in, whatever. Like all these things. And then like the people who and then there's people like sexually exploiting. There's all kinds of these things that happen.
Hmm.
And and that's what Arc One reminds me of, man, when he gets to Yavin and there's these two they have a split and he's kidnapped. This is Andor getting kidnapped, and it's just what a mess.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, having our notes here, the messy revolutionaries of the Maya Pay Brigade,
Yeah.
which is the kind of disparate band of rebels who are, as it turns out, on Yavin, which isn't revealed until the end of this first season 2 episode,
Hmm.
is where Cassian is supposed to meet um someone named Porco because he's just
Porco.
stolen an Imperial TIE fighter. I have to imagine that that's a reference to Porco Rosso, was the anti-fascist pig
Okay.
pilot from Hayao Miyazaki.
And they
um,
killed Porco, these
Yeah.
they killed
revolutionaries.
Porco, yeah, because he was aggressive.
Uh,
um, but yeah, no, I
yeah.
a lot of people's initial reactions to the two episodes featuring these characters, they thought it was like the weakest element. I think in part because the acting is it's not
Hmm.
great. It's some of like the rare like not great acting in this entire series, but also they just didn't get the purpose of it story wise,
It goes
and
on
I
a
think
while. It goes
it
on a while.
does. But I
He's
think,
stuck there, not able to do anything for a while.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
And these
like,
people are like rudderless or
yeah,
Yeah.
like actually there's no hierarchy. Like it's kind of like how anarchists imagine themselves
yeah,
forming their collective, but then everything kind of falls apart. Like you say in the Doris
mhm,
Yeah.
Lessing book, no one quite knows what they should be doing. Everyone's kind of vying for some sort of power, but not admitting that they actually want a leadership position, and no one trusts each other. And it's
yeah.
just
they're,
messy.
they're on the autonomous planet of Chaz, right? Like, yeah, it's
So
it's it's
painful.
definitely a leaderless group who they all think that they're the leader,
Yeah.
and because there's no structure, they start literally turning on each other, right?
Yeah.
Where where one faction literally just tries to pull the TIE fighter in
Yeah,
the general
yeah.
direction
And
of
then
the
they
other group
have,
ship.
and then they have some, uh, yeah, they have some of them who start to fall for, and like Andor's kind of working them. You can tell the longer he's
Yeah.
there, he's gonna end up in charge of this group because there's such a vacuum. But what do you think Gilroy's trying to do here? Like what do you think this is? Like what's he doing? What's the theme
Mm.
here?
I mean, part of it is world building,
Yeah.
Hmm.
right? And like different factions of, I don't know, like if we want to put it into the context of like how we see, revolutions being built. There's the petty bourgeoisie, there's the,
Mhm.
there's the like the proletariat, there's the liberals who don't really know what they're doing. Yeah, so I
And
don't
then
know,
there's these
maybe,
guys.
and then there's these guys who are kind of, yeah, like, I don't know,
This
the,
is absolutely like my life. Like this was the most like painfully like embarrassingly like close to my experiences that
yeah.
Yeah.
I always
Let's
I want to be Luthen, but I'm actually like one of these people on
Well,
Yemen.
When shit hits the fan, are you gonna be like, you know, the
I'm
sewage
gonna be
guy, or are you gonna
splitting.
be the
I'm gonna be
right?
splitting from whatever group I'm in and writing manifestos against the sectarians on the other side.
The radical humanists or whatever
That's
the,
right.
the the
That's
the
right.
list of different factions that Saw Gerrera lists off.
Yes.
Yeah. The neo Republicans. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
No, but
Hmm.
yeah, I think so. Yeah, it reveals at the very end that the planet, as Cassian's escaping it, is Yavin, as in Yavin 4, which in the original trilogy is the home base for the rebels where they staged their rebellion, right? And I
Mhm.
think that's definitely more than just like a fan service type
Yeah.
reference, because
No,
especially
it's not.
because the series culminates on
Yeah.
Yavin as well,
Hmm.
right? And I think the entire point is that he's trying to show like where the revolution ends up making its final stand, right? And where like the victory of the rebellion actually hinges, starts off as this ragtag group of people
Hmm.
who don't even know like what native like plants are okay to eat, and are like being picked off by these
Yeah.
creatures in the night, and also like fighting each other.
Yeah.
There's just the incredible infighting, like, so showing like how that is the birth pangs of like every
Hmm.
revolution, is people uh in the like that old expression, like trying to cross the river by feeling the stones, right,
Yeah.
with your feet, is like,
Well, yeah.
you
And
know,
in China,
like
they managed to
especially,
do
yeah, exactly, yeah.
that.
And
But I have studied like the communists in Afghanistan and some communist factions in India in the 70s and lots of rebellions in Asia and Latin America and even like in the DR, the Democratic Republic of Congo in the 60s. And it's like I study the successes a lot, like Castro, but like some communists aren't that good at being communists,
yeah.
and I like that's a painful conclusion about some of these rebellions that didn't work. It's like there were huge mistakes that were made by the leaders, and like not every leader is automatically Castro because they decide
Mhm.
to
Yeah.
you know take up the struggle. Like that there are some people that are better at this than others.
Yeah.
Um,
Anyway, I think we
yeah,
should actually
yeah.
are you going to be able to edit this, Justin? Because I think we should do an intro, especially if we're assuming that people are going to listen to this episode first and then work
Oh,
their way back to the first one.
That's right.
yeah. Well, I also am a big believer in like just jump right in as a listener, as a viewer. As a listener, I'm always like, when are they gonna introduce this forever? Like, start pressing that 30 seconds forward button. But yeah,
True.
um,
Well,
am I?
anyway, to the listener who is just jumping in on this one, because we are assuming
Yeah.
that you're going to want to listen to season two before
Yes.
listening to the season one episode. This is the second episode of Tanky Cinema, but by probability, the first episode of Tanky
That you're
Cinema that
gonna
you're
listen
going to
to.
be listening to.
That's right.
This is a Tanky analysis of the Disney limited
Disney
series
show.
Andor, that is vigorously pro revolution and
Mhm.
unapologetic in its support of armed military resistance against a genocidal power.
Yeah.
And
Pretty
it is
wacky.
a show that that is one of its kind, and will likely never be made again until probably after the revolution,
It's
if
not the
there ever
show we
is.
deserved, but it is the show we need. Yeah.
Absolutely. And so yeah, so just establishing what happens in arc 1, the first 3 episodes of this second and final season. Yeah. What leads Andor to Yavin is the fact that he was supposed to meet and trade off with another rebel contact, this Imperial TIE fighter that's like a new model that he's stolen from this, I believe, like a test facility.
Oh
And
my
this is
God,
where
that
one of
opening
my,
scene is fantastic too.
yes, talk about it.
I mean, I just love how like just very very like cinematic it was. And it's strange to say that about something that's like almost cinema, but like you know, it
Mhm.
kind of drops you into this whatever test facility or like storage bay for these like brand new TIE fighters that are just
Mm-hmm.
hitting the market basically. And Andor like it kind of negotiates with one of the test pilots to convince them or to convince like the bosses that he's actually like their new test pilot and he has to be let onto the sales floor basically.
Yeah.
Um, and you know, there's like quips with the like the higher up kind of managerial person in charge of the testing. Um, you know, that like, oh my God, he's so cute. And
Yeah.
so his handsomeness and charisma kind of allow him to navigate through this test facility. He ends up just kind of walking into the TIE fighter, not knowing at all how to operate it. There's
He
like
doesn't
a
even know how the seat goes
gazillion,
up.
right? There's a gazillion buttons that have absolutely no like signage at all. And he ends up like barely making it out. But you know, but banging it up against the walls so much that the stormtroopers come in and realize that he's trying to steal it, and they get got by the whatever it is laser gun thing that is attached to the TIE fighter itself, and he makes it out. It's fantastic, but it's funny, it's hilarious because he's you
Yeah.
know totally like wrecking it inside the little hangar bay thing.
Yeah, no, and I think like a lesser show, or even a show that I would like, or a movie that I would like I think like Ethan Hunt in Mission Impossible is like a good example of just so competent. Like even when he doesn't
Mm-hmm.
know what he's doing, he's always like
Right.
pulling something off. And
Yeah.
and I think like this is like much more true to life, where it's like he's infiltrating this place, and of course nothing ever goes to plan, and he doesn't know how to even like operate the gunners, and then he ends up using like a beam that's meant probably to destroy like a large vehicle on this one guy with
Yeah.
a rocket
Yeah.
launcher. and
Yeah.
and that's how he has to blow literally his way through like the bay doors.
Yeah.
But honestly, like my favorite scene in this entire arc is that very first scene
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
with this woman who is clearly organized, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
She's one of the people who's infiltrated this place. It's implied that she has worked here before because she's coming back, and that kind of increases the danger for her because that requires that she have some kind of cover story. And it's just it's so beautiful. And like as an organizer, like I really resonated with his monologue, because I think like every person who has done community organizing has a pitch like this in what's called a structured organizing conversation, where your main objective is to try to move someone to get organized, right? And the last stage of that pitch is basically kind of like, well, besides making a plan to meet again and do next steps, is kind of like walking them through their last jitters, right? The
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
legitimate fears that they have against management or the bosses. In this case it's the empire. Right? And so she
Mm-hmm.
voices those fears, and then Andor tells her, and I'm going to read from the monologue. She's wondering whether all of this is even going to be worth it if she ends up being killed by the end of it. And he said, this makes it worth it. This, right now, being with you, being here at the moment you step into the circle. Look at me. You made this decision long ago. The Empire cannot win. You will never feel right unless you're doing what you can to stop them. You are coming home to yourself. You've become more than your fear. Let that protect you. I love
Mm-hmm.
that line. You are
That's
coming home
gorgeous.
to yourself, and
Mm-hmm.
just like telling that to someone who you've just recruited into the revolution is just, it's so beautiful. Yeah, I have a line like that I repeat often. It's like when someone's like finally ready to kind of like get into movement work, I tell them like, that first step is always the scariest, but it's the last step you'll ever have to take alone. And so
Oh.
yeah, I think like there's that moment I think that everyone has when the contradictions in their head have finally settled into some kind of resolution to engage in revolution, right? And that is a really scary step, because especially if you are currently employed, right? It often means
Mhm.
like a lot of risks you're going to have to take upon yourself and possibly your family. Uh, Especially if you're going to decide to be outward about your politics, and we're seeing that especially over the past 2 years. The actual economic and
Yeah.
personal consequences you face for standing for what is so clearly and obviously the right thing to stand up for. And
Yeah.
so yeah, that was just a really really moving part of the show for me. And it's one of the many Gilroy, or I believe Gilroy wrote this monologue,
Yeah.
where the thesis of the show is restated. And
Yeah.
there are two other storylines that are occurring parallel with the one on Yavin. One is on Chandrila, where
Mhm.
Mon Mothma's daughter is getting married. Not much to talk about there except for the wedding DJ droid, which I thought was awesome.
Right.
But on Minarao, where Bix, Wellman,
Yeah.
and Brasso are hiding out basically as undocumented workers,
Mhm.
Yeah.
because they had to leave Ferrix, which was their home planet, which we
Mhm.
later find out in a near in I think the last episode was basically destroyed in the same way other planets have been destroyed in the wake of that rebellion.
Mhm.
And yeah, what do folks think of the episodes scenes that take place in Mina Rao? Because there is that one very kind of like shocking and definitely a first for Star Wars, let alone Disney, scenes with Bix.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, I felt like it was that I thought it was a really good way of making you feel that dread
mhm,
of that kind of encompassing dread of like they're coming, whether
Yeah.
it's the
mhm.
police or like the invaders or the occupier or whatever, and like the ship, and they're passing whatever little information they have, and then like when they come, there's like absolutely nothing you can do. Yeah, I thought that they captured that really well. I don't know.
Yeah. And Bix, still deeply traumatized by her assault from the previous season. What was his name?
Dr. Gorst,
That's it, Gorst.
yeah, her
Yeah.
torturer.
Yeah. And being separated from Cassian and trying to be um kind of, blend in as an undocumented worker in the fields. It looks like wheat fields on this planet. Um and then yeah, the Empire, rolls in with its foot soldiers, the Gestapo, the ICE police, under the guise of like, just counting people, accounting for people and their work. And she's once again like put into a position that's really scary. And yeah, just this, very this very kind of visceral response to the kind of unchecked power of the empire, um, doing whatever they want to do, grabbing whoever they want to grab, threatening people, especially women, making, disgusting advances. And then Cassian shows up.
Yeah,
Yeah, that was I mean, that was a little bit Star Warsy.
Yeah,
The fact
yeah,
that there's always that rescue that
right.
happens. Although, the Brasso, you know,
Yeah,
yeah,
R.I.P. Brasso.
yeah, that was sad.
But that was a pretty cool thing that he did. That was also like an insurgency kind of it's in the insurgency manual, right? Like to kind of he made a big show of
yeah.
getting mad at the guy that was actually working for them
Mm.
Hmm.
and saying, "Ah, you sold us out" and stuff, and then running away. And you kind of you when you watch it carefully, you can see he's doing that to kind of say
To
like,
save him.
don't
Yeah.
like the chain. You don't need to look any further. Like
Hmm.
this guy's with you.
Yeah.
He's.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
God,
it's
that
just
was yeah, that was a great
another
moment.
noble act from these rebels.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Another honorable thing.
But yeah, I mean, like, I mean, it was pretty shocking to me that like there was like an actual attempted rape
Yeah.
in it,
Yeah.
like any kind of Star Wars thing, and uh,
Yeah.
and she explicitly says the word, like in that scene, and there was a lot of like online discussion about whether that should have been in there at all. There was a comment by some dumbass that turned into viral discourse about like how Darth Vader never would have stood by and allowed that to happen. And
Oh
it's
yeah.
like, and I
Darth
think,
Vader went to like a kindergarten and slaughtered all the children
yeah,
there
he
with his
killed a
own
bunch of,
Yeah.
sword.
Like based on what evidence? I don't
Killed
know.
his
yeah,
wife, killed his pregnant wife
Yeah.
with the
yeah.
force choke.
And when Gilroy's asked about it, about that scene, he's very candid about it, and I think kind of like defends the decision quite well. Like he was talking about how like there's, like in the legacy of colonial violence, like rape has always been like
Yeah.
this weapon,
Yeah, it's a
right?
threat. Yeah.
Yeah, and a method of oppression and control. And so yeah, why wouldn't it be
Yeah.
in a series that's so explicitly about all of those things, right? I'm glad it didn't actually end up happening, and that Bix like
Yeah.
brains him with
Yeah,
like a
he's
wrench.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, God, that character's been through so much.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Bix.
I think
arc two.
that's yeah, arc two.
So arc
Um,
two for me was really in terms of the way that it's captures some aspect of imperialism.
hmm,
I've never seen the way propaganda works to be so well captured in
Hmm.
fiction. So there's a meeting where these two public relations guys are explaining to the other genocidal bureaucrats that they planted certain stories and talking points like Hamas beheaded babies or like
Right.
yeah,
you know or whatever like rapes on October 7th or
right,
whatever it is like these they had this phrase where they said, isn't it doesn't it don't these Gormans like seem a little bit arrogant to you? And they were like, that was us. We planted that. And then later on in the series, you see one of the bureaucrats, Cyril, who's got a fascinating arc through this season, through the whole
yeah,
story. He's like a bureaucrat who badly wants to rise through the bureaucracy and starts to rise through the bureaucracy and and then it's a little too much for him what the empire is actually doing. So we'll get back to him. But Cyril and his mother also wants him to rise badly through the bureaucracy. And his mother, when he's talking to his mother later on in the series, his mother is repeating these talking points to him.
Yeah.
And I've never seen, I haven't watched like Mad Men. I don't know whether these things happen in television shows that I haven't seen, but the like where you see the spin doctors creating the talking points and presenting them proudly, and then you see people repeating them.
Yeah.
That was
there's a scene
really
with
well
much
done.
Really
lower
good.
stakes where Betty Draper buys Heineken based on
Oh,
advertising that Don puts
okay.
out,
Yeah,
and
so
she
I
feels really
figure,
betrayed by that, but it's not on like a
yeah,
genocidal scale for
right.
sure.
So,
um
and the other thing is, this is they're talking about it like this Krennic, who's the principal antagonist in Rogue One, and I believe this is his first appearance in Andor. Am I right? And he's the
I
one
believe so, yeah.
he's chairing the meeting and presenting what the Emperor wants.
Hmm.
And what the Emperor wants is energy, but it turns out again later on we're going to find out that it's not really about energy.
Right.
It's about the Death Star and
Yeah,
uh
and calcite.
and calcite or
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the
calcite
important
is
Synthetic.
rare
the
mineral that they
Yeah.
need to complete the Death
Calcite is
Star.
the star path unit. So we had the star path unit in the first season, and now we have Calcite in season two. So it's just,
Yeah,
what was it
and
called
Gorman has a lot of it.
in Avatar? In Avatar, it was called
Unobtainium.
unobtainium or something. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, yeah,
So,
But it's
so
really
yeah.
interesting. Like, again, I don't think I've ever seen that in on screen, like
Hmm.
the bureaucratic management of a
Hmm.
planned genocide, a
Yeah.
planned, colonial project, a planned color revolution, a
Yeah.
planned
Yeah.
counterinsurgency, like all of these, they were really putting in all the elements that an empire needs to dominate and destroy, an indigenous population or a planet, or, and under the guise of, extracting minerals, or, making a profit off of their like spider web fabric or whatever, um, and all to make it submit to the empire's will.
And
Um,
they ultimately are going to mine this planet until it's collapses. The
right,
plan is
Yeah,
to
because the
extract.
gouge
right,
mining will destabilize the planet's core. So
Yeah.
they're basically, long ahead of time condemning this entire planet and all of its people and all of its spiders
And it's
yeah,
to
lovely
a certain
industry.
death.
They make there's this highly skilled, industry that is
Yeah.
sustainable and has
yeah,
these spiders and people working together to produce this material, and
Yeah.
they're gonna just destroy it all,
yeah.
you know.
Yeah, I
Just
mean, like, and
It's amazing.
so it should be said that this was all written and filmed for the most part prior to October 7th, but it's so crazy coincidental that like this whole kind of Gorman plot involves like indigenous people who have basically this singular export that is a textile like that is
Hmm.
unique to
yeah,
this place,
yeah.
it's just, I mean, there's
Yeah,
so many parallels, whether intentional or accidental or coincidental, that just you can't help but think of Gaza, and of Palestine generally throughout this, this entire
yeah.
storyline. But yeah, so that first scene with Krennic in arc 2 is, it's very clearly kind of modeled after the Nazis Wannsee conference, where they, you know, just plan out the final solution.
Yeah.
And yeah,
But it
that's
had a really American feel because there
So
were
yes.
American.
PowerPoints,
Yep.
PowerPoints and
Yeah.
films and
Yeah.
propaganda videos and PR. And
Yeah.
then, the way they broke, like again, people who have worked in corporate environments, they had a little break for coffee and they had these side conversations. And then Krennic, I think, approached our bad guy protagonist, Dedra Miro, um, who's like the Javert we mentioned, like in Les Miserables, she would be the
Mm-hmm.
Javert. She's the super cop who's hunting the rebel leadership.
Mm-hmm.
And she's the one who says, your plan's not going to work. You need to have infiltration to the point of coordinating the rebels. You need a group of
Mm-hmm.
rebels, she says, that that can be counted on to do the wrong thing.
Like the
And
Palestinian Authority.
yeah, like the
Yeah.
Palestinian Authority, but like
Yeah.
everywhere, right? And this is like
Yeah.
speaks to like how they infiltrate every group. And I thought more of like the cultural Cold War and like the journals and George
Mm.
Orwell and Hannah Arendt and
Mm.
how all of these left-wing writers for left-wing journals during the Cold War were actually working for the
Yeah.
CIA and the
Well, I actually felt that it was like I mean, you can make a solid parallel to Hamas too, right? Because I think like there's all these like people who claim like a pro-Palestine mantle, who say like Hamas was funded by Israel, right?
Right.
funded by
And
Israel.
and
Yeah.
it's like, while it's true that there were, some factions within, Israel's like clandestine leadership that like tried to create cleavages between Hamas and Fatah, like that doesn't mean that Hamas's resistance is illegitimate, right?
No, no,
Like,
but yeah. Well,
and so
funded,
like, because
yeah.
that's, yeah, I mean, like,
Funded
what,
is
yeah,
like Sammy Dune had a thread about this where they were talking about funded. They were like, don't say funded. Like the
exactly,
Israelis stole all the money.
Yeah.
They've
yeah,
stolen all the money, and they had this kind of system where they were allowing a certain amount of money to not be stolen. So it's like
yeah,
that's not funding Hamas.
Right.
yeah.
That's
It's
like
like arguing that
using.
they're providing humanitarian aid. It's like, no, they've stolen
That's right.
Yeah,
everything
they've
and they're
destroyed the
trickling in
food
little bits
system.
of it.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
And
they're
it's not even
closing the
theirs to
crossings.
give. It's
It's not theirs to
international
give.
aid, and
Yeah.
it's their
Yeah.
international legal obligation, right? Whatever,
Yeah.
meaning international laws ever have anymore. But
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
So like, because what I would argue is that like even though the Empire is attempting to orchestrate this armed
mhm,
resistance, the armed resistance would have happened anyway, probably
yes,
within this exact same configuration, and that
yeah.
doesn't take away anything from this Gorman resistance, right?
right.
Their efforts are still like righteous, and
Yeah,
even though
absolutely.
it's
And but
clearly
it's
doomed,
Yeah,
like
there's
yeah.
there's things that are real here. Like one of the things
Hmm.
that's real is that they do infiltrate and they do try to
Yeah.
steer things in either an
Hmm.
ineffective direction or
yeah,
a way that gets the leadership to unwound or catches
Hmm.
everybody, whatever, all of these things. And the other thing is that there is a certain arrogance to think that you can infiltrate this, like this guy Cyril of all people,
Hmm.
and that he's going to be able to run the rebellion. Um,
Yeah.
and all of those things ring true, right? But like, well, the
Yeah.
other example, like you were talking about the Palestinian Authority and we were talking about Hamas, but like in Toronto, I think it was 2010, there was a G20 meeting. I think it was a G20, a big summit, and there was big demonstrations here against it, and there were, it was anarchists and different groups of activists that were doing this big demonstration, and they were infiltrated by police, and when it was all kind of exposed eventually, but like the police, this is one of these stories that always gets me. Like one of the cops was a female police officer who told these activists that she was fleeing from a domestic abuse situation. So they kind of let her in and open their home and everything because of this story. So it's like
Mhm.
the cops are
wow,
like, these are dangerous terrorists,
Yeah.
right? Who are gonna
Yeah.
take in this woman who says she's
Yeah.
got a domestic abuse story.
yeah,
So how scary are these people
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
they're absolute suckers that are gonna take in somebody on a with a
Yeah.
sad story about domestic abuse?
Infiltrate these evil people by appealing to their
Yeah, by
overwhelming
appealing
good
sense of
nature.
humanity and
to their
Yeah,
absolute hearts that they wear on their sleeves because they're absolute bleeding heart suckers. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, it's
boy,
and so all of these things are set up um beautifully, and like in terms of like the relationships,
hmm
now Cyril, this semi-competent bureaucrat who's some kind of like totally innocent, like mama's boy,
yeah,
Yeah.
and
total
then
mama's boy.
and now he's with Dedra, so you kind of realize
Mm.
in this sequence that they're in a relationship now,
Hmm.
And
which
that scene
is
of them like getting ready for the party, I can't remember what it
Yeah,
was.
the dinner party,
The dinner
like with the
party.
to host the mother. Yeah.
Yes, that's right. Yes, that's it. Just, the most like cold, um, you know, these like little vignettes of them like putting on, these very crisp suits and
Mhm.
slicking, the hair back and, you
Practicing a
know,
smile.
yes, exactly. Just, and everything in their house is sort of what we call here in the Bay Area gentrification gray. It's like it's
Yeah.
very it's like the epitome of chic is just total blandness, no color, no life,
Hmm.
to their domestic habitat or themselves either. They both also just wear gray and black. And I mean,
Yeah.
not knocking that, those are my colors too, but like there's no there's just kind of this like void of where joy should be in a new
Totally
relationship, I
antiseptic.
guess.
Yeah.
Completely
Yeah.
it's very clinical. And then the
Yeah.
mom comes in and she's just she's a nightmare. I mean, in the first season, you get to see her and you're like,
She's
what the
fantastic.
hell? She's
So good.
amazing.
That
Just a
actress.
great character, but she is
Yeah.
terrifying. And for Vedra to or Dedra to see her like future mother-in-law, um just from like right off the bat, just like criticizing and chastising her, and um yeah, it's fantastic. It was great.
Yeah.
But you have to know
And
like how bad someone is if you're cheering for Dedra
Yeah.
when
yeah,
Dedra
yeah.
like puts it into place, right?
Yeah, if you're rooting for either Cyril or Dedra, and that's how I think so perfectly written these types of characters are, where you're even kind of like hoping for the best between these two fascists
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
their fascist loving relationship.
Yeah, you feel bad
Where
for
you're rooting
them because
against
it's
them,
yeah.
but you're
Yeah.
also like, yeah, so excited to see them living together and to see Dedra defending him and basically blackmailing the mother with family time. And
Yeah.
oh man. But yeah,
Crazy.
speaking of love, I think one of the most like interesting parts of this arc is the relationship between Bix and Cassian.
Mm.
And they've kind of been on again, off again, like throughout their like even their childhood in Ferrex, right? But now they're together again. And there's this really beautiful like romantic scene where they have some kind of like hand like signing and touching that's like coordinated, that's like clearly like part of some kind of culture, but it's also like a shared love language between them that's really romantic. And it's while they're in a safe house, and Bix is still, you know, experiencing like really intense episodes of PTSD and having these terrible nightmares. That's really like uh really well done, because it's like a combination of the attempted rape on her and also Dr. Gorse, who tortured her, and she can't get over that for obvious reasons. And uh Cassian has to confront Luthen about kind of like the really unsympathetic way that he's dealing with the struggles that Bix is going through.
Yeah.
And just kind of like the lack of humanity, where it's like he's always just searching for vulnerabilities, right? And how that might lead back to him or disrupt the revolution. and and we discussed this in the previous episode, but I think the show deals really well with these questions of like, what is required of us for engaging in revolution, what do we have to sacrifice, and what do we have to hold tight to. And I think this is Bix and Cassian's relationship is, as I think, wrestles really intensely with that question throughout this second season. So their situation, which is in this safe house, like in Coruscant, like the most populated, the whole city is the whole planet is a city, is, is how it's referred to in Star Wars lore, which is ridiculous, but you know, it just means it's a really heavily populated urban environment. And they're kind of, you know, they're hiding out there while also carrying out missions. But it made me think of Wissam Rafidi's Trinity of Fundamentals, because you know he's through a lot of the novel, the kind of fictionalized semi biographical story. You know, he's a Palestinian engaged in revolutionary resistance, in like alone. Yeah, there it is. Ooh, yeah,
My
alone in a
copy's
safe house.
downstairs.
And you know, his character has a
Wait,
relationship.
are we gonna do an episode on this too? Probably.
Oh, that
Maybe
would
we
be
should.
awesome.
Reading
I would
groups.
love
We'll
that. We
bookmark
can
that.
get my
Yeah.
friend Gassan Rafidi to talk about it because Gassan is
Oh,
Wissam's nephew.
It's a date.
Yep.
whoa, that would be
He would
awesome.
love it.
Okay, we'll do that.
But anyway, yeah, he has this character who's, you know, he's got a girlfriend, but the relationship doesn't last because, you know,
She's not a
she
revolutionary.
yeah. And it's
She
hard,
doesn't.
like
Yeah.
It's hard to have like a regular relationship outside of like a
Yeah.
revolution,
Well,
right?
I mean that
So
that is
it's like,
one thing that Cassian and Bix have, which is like
Yeah.
they're on the same team, and
yeah,
it's like I guess in story terms, Cassian is perpetually trying to refuse the journey, and
yeah,
Bix is always the one kind of saying no, you know, calling
yeah.
him back to the journey.
Yeah. But I love how they
Despite
resolve this particular
yes,
issue at the end of this
the
arc.
healing journey
Yeah, let the healing
for
begin.
Bix. Yeah.
Yeah, so like we find out on the Empire side of the story that uh the em- the Emperor Palpatine has decided to programatize Dr. Gore's torture methods.
Yeah.
And so we get this closing scene where he comes back from one of the Senate investiture parties with like a little boxed cake. And then he goes into his little torture room, and Bix is there and puts him on the torture machine, and kills him, and on her way out kills a guard who says you're not supposed to be here, and then walks away with Cassian and blows
And
up the entire floor.
and
Yeah.
cool guys don't look at explosions. So this was very Hollywood, right? Like a
Yes.
revenge, a Hollywood revenge plot, but very satisfying ultimately
Yeah.
because
Yeah,
these are
it's awesome.
stories. But then so there's like what in screenwriting it's like there's the A, B, C stories. So we're going to so the
Yeah.
B story is on Gorman, right? Where
Yes.
we have this
Where Cyril's
operation.
firmly embedded now.
Yeah.
And we meet
Cyril's-
all of the French partisans, which is, yeah, I mean, it's definitely a lot of echoes of Palestine, but like it's
sounds like
clearly
French,
a
and
take
you're
on like
just
Vichy
listening to it, and
France.
you're just like, "That's not French.
I
What are they
know.
saying?" But they're saying it's
Exactly.
French.
I was
but
like, is this Flemish? Is this what
yeah,
Flemish
but it's
sounds
not,
like? It's
right? It's not a
not.
real
No, they
language
made
that
No,
was
up
they
put up.
they made
invented
up,
Yeah,
yeah. But I think
a
they hired
language that is
French
phonetically
actors.
French.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
they're francophones.
Yeah,
They
it
made
was
up.
fascinating.
Yeah,
It was
Yeah.
it was very
fascinating.
frustrating because your
I
mind is like
know.
constantly like, "I can get this.
I
This is French.
almost
I can
understand
get
what they're
this."
saying, but it is
Yeah.
nonsense. Yeah.
Yeah.
And also it's a struggle because you're constantly fighting the urge to hate them because of how French they are. But they're so deeply sympathetic.
No, I didn't have that. I didn't. I
That's
know.
deep.
Okay,
That's deep.
Yeah. I didn't have that. I guess it could be because the bad guys had very strong English accents. That
There
was
you go. There you go. It's
never
on a
hard for me to
spectrum.
choose or figure out who the bad guys were.
Well, anyway,
But
there's several great monologues in this arc too. I don't think we have time to read them all. I wanted to read Vel's speech after
right. So
Cinta,
this is
her
another
lover, is killed,
messy.
but
This is another
yeah,
messy
Yeah.
revolutionary moment
yeah,
because there's a subplot with two relatively minor characters, Val and Cinta, who
mhm.
you saw in the robbery job,
Yeah.
and they had a relationship then.
Yeah. Does
And
anyone want to read this one? Because I
yeah,
want to read Saw Gerrera's.
Yeah, go
okay.
go
Then
for it.
Val is on you, Nora.
Oh, me? Okay. Look at me. I'm not going to say remember this because I don't have to. This is on you now. This is like skin. You're taking her with you wherever you go for the rest of your useless life. Don't you look away from me. She was a warrior. She was everything you daydreamed about. She was a blooded, fearless warrior whose loss will be mourned in ways that you will never understand. She was a miracle. And you, to die like this because of you, some whining, simpering, foolish child, don't you dare cry. You'll make this up forever. You'll make up this forever.
Eh,
Make up for this. Sorry.
Make up for
which
Yeah,
this,
this
for
is
this.
so
You'll
good.
make up this. You'll make up for this forever. There
which
you go.
he does in a way.
Yeah,
He sure
yeah.
does.
He
But
he
like
he ends up being the driver who destroys the K2 unit that eventually becomes
That's right.
K2SO.
this
Yeah.
was a messy revolutionary kind of thing
Yeah.
too because they're not
Yes.
following procedure, and this
And
guy
what happens
stumbles
when you
on
don't
them.
follow procedure?
Shouldn't have had
Yep.
he shouldn't have had a blaster. They were supposed to only have
Yeah.
the
Yeah, only
leaders
Vel and
just
Cinto were supposed to have blasters, and this guy brings a
big
blaster,
mess.
and it turns into a friendly fire incident that
Yeah.
kills Cinta.
Yeah.
And yeah,
And
but
Cinta
yeah,
also
yeah.
killed her friend, killed Mon Mothma's friend in the
Oh
previous
yes,
arc
in arc one, yeah,
off
yeah.
screen.
Cinta kills Take Coma because he becomes an
An
area of
intelligence issue.
vulnerability. Yeah,
Mm.
because his finances, like a lot of his investments, were hurt by rebel activity.
And he
So
was threatening to expose, like he was blackmailing Mon Mothma, right? So it was he was
sort of,
he was like,
yeah.
that's kind of problematic for me,
Yeah.
And like
Yeah.
once you put that's she told Luthen like he wants money, and Luthen was
Yeah.
and he was like, she was like, we'll find a number,
Mhm.
and Luthen was like, the number. And
Yeah.
then she says, I'm not sure I understand. And he says, how nice for you. And I remember that little exchange was memorable to me because it was also like, it was like a very like, you don't blackmail these guys,
Yeah.
don't,
Yeah.
that's not a
not
good
gonna work.
idea. Like this is life or death.
Yeah.
Did you know that in the Philippines, you guys, I covered this in my podcast. In the Philippines, during the revolution, like around the turn of the century, there were these two revolutionary leaders, and they were, heavily surveilled and infiltrated and stuff by the Spanish, and they were trying to raise money from some billionaires, and they they the bill this or not a billionaire, but like this wealthy person turned them down, refused to support the
Mhm.
revolution. So they contrived to have a thank you letter to him found at one of their like locations. So the police went in, they found this letter saying, thank you, rich person, for all the money that you donated to our cause. And they
Brilliant.
got the guy killed. Like,
Oh,
the Spanish, the
wow.
Spanish killed the
That's
guy.
great.
So,
Oh man.
yeah. So
Oh.
it's pretty cool. I was like, whoa, that's ice cold. That
That
was,
is
yeah.
ice cold.
Those were,
Well,
yeah. It was ice
fuck
cold.
around and find out. I don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Could have just given them the money, I guess. Whew.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Nice.
Luthen
Well,
is like that.
Yeah.
Luthen
He's
is
kind of he's
he's that
cutthroat.
guy.
yeah. In
Yep.
the last in the third arc, yeah, no, in the final arc when he's talking to Lonnie, and Lonnie says something like, I'm only going to tell you this if you guarantee this and that, and Luthen
Yeah.
says, "Are we bargaining now?" I was like, "Oh no." Oh
Yeah.
no. So, yeah, that was bad.
So
So,
anyway, there's one last subplot, and it's the inclusion of Saw Gerrera.
mhm,
And he's in Rogue One, and yeah, this is his first appearance in Andor, and he is God. I love this character. Uh, I feel like I don't know when he was written because he's in the prequels too, right? But his name just sounds like Che Guevara, right?
yeah,
um,
yeah,
in, in
yeah.
in Rogue One, like he's portrayed as just a purely like paranoid maniac. What I love about Andor is that it establishes just how justified so much of his paranoia is.
Yes,
Like where
yes,
like
Yeah.
later in the final
absolutely.
arc, I forget the name of the character, but like he's arguing over a hologram with Mon Mothma about being spied on, and she like after they hang up, she's just like, that dude's like so crazy. And it's like, no, actually we are spying on him. He knows about like how heavily we've infiltrated him to keep tabs on him.
Yeah,
And yeah, and so like he is trying to get rhydonium, which is like basically jet fuel, um
yeah.
for not just to fuel his ships, but he's like kind of like addicted to the gas, which it later becomes clear that the thing that he's breathing on in Rogue One is not a respirator, it's just him huffing gas.
It's huffing.
um, which is so great. But
Legend.
he has Wilman sent over to him to teach one of his people like certain like processes of illegally extracting rhydonium from a facility. And
I
it turns
never
out,
understood what it was that he was teaching. That now you've told it to me now. I
yeah,
knew there were 18 different ways of doing it or something, and
yeah,
well, anyway, it was I
yeah, and
didn't
then
understand.
apparently it's a very volatile process where everyone could explode in the attempt to
I
extract it.
thought of like Breaking Bad and like making the blue meth,
Yeah.
basically. That was sort
Yeah,
of what I
Yeah, it was weird that
yeah,
it wasn't explained actually. It was very I don't know. That was
Gilroy. I mean, that's one complaint, right? Like you watch George
yeah.
Lucas, you watch the prequels, and it's everything's on the nose. It's
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Christopher Lee, is that his name? Saruman, and he's
Uh-huh.
like,
yeah.
"This duel will not be decided through the Force, but through the lightsaber." And you're like,
Yeah.
"Oh my God."
Just do it. Right, yeah.
Nobody needed to say that. None of that needed to be spoken whatsoever. And then, meanwhile, and then Tony Gilroy, like, he doesn't say things that you need to know. Like,
Yeah.
Well,
there's
I think it's not important really. Like you don't
right,
even it's
right,
not even explicitly stated what Son needs the rhydonium for.
right,
Like,
right.
which I mean, it would have been nice, if they had the 5 seasons that they were initially planning to do. But like, I don't care because it's like what is trying to be communicated through those scenes where Wilman is teaching the other
Hmm.
guy like how to do it is the guy's asking too many fucking questions,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Mm.
yeah, yeah.
Like,
Security
and
issue.
it later like people thought that it was like ambiguous after Saw shoots him, whether the guy was actually an infiltrator. To me, it was
Oh,
very clear that he
yeah.
was. Like, if you watch that episode a second time, the guy's asking very, very
Yeah.
sensitive questions, and he won't stop asking them, right?
Yeah.
And so yeah, there's the scene to close out that episode where I get to do Forrest Whitaker's Saw Gerrera voice now, where
You're
they're
high as a
extracting
kite.
the Rhydonium, and Saw tells this really kind of like harrowing story about how he was basically a child slave, forced into these mines where that was his first exposure to Rhydonium, and it killed a bunch of people. But yeah, so he says, "You think I'm crazy? Yes,
Pretty good.
I am. Revolution is not for the sane. Look at us, unloved, hunted, cannon fodder. We'll all be dead before the Republic is back, and yet here we are. You're here. We're the Rhino Kid. We're the fuel. We're the thing that explodes when there's too much friction in the air. Let it in, boy. That's freedom calling. Let it in. Let it run. Let it run wild."
Oh my god.
Oof.
And it's
Yeah.
such a great scene, because yeah, he huffs gas with this young man, but it's like it's just it's how I've been feeling. I think how a lot
Yeah.
of us have been feeling in tanky therapy for the past 2 years. Like, I feel literally insane every
Yeah.
time there's a
Mm.
moment where any of this genocide is both sides, or
Yeah.
any of the bullshit Hasbaro narratives are just taken for granted as truth. And I think like that's, and also just the fact that he explicitly accepts that there, like, people like him don't survive to see the other side of the revolution. And I
Yeah.
think like it means one thing when Luthen says it, but I think um it means something else when someone like Saw says it, because of how like openly engaged in revolution he is, but also how
Mhm.
we know from Rogue One that he dies, you know, whereas
Yeah.
Luthen, we don't know that he dies until much
We don't
later.
know yet.
And yeah, it's just, oh man.
But Guerrera, I mean, yeah, like I love that character who's not controllable by anybody.
Yeah.
You know, the rebels can't. The rebels are always like, Jesus Christ, so Guerrera, please stop
He's so
raiding
funny.
those supply lines. It's not, and he's just like, no,
Yeah, I'm gonna do it.
I'm gonna do
Yeah.
it. And
Revolutionary optimism. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and just that there is a way like Che Guevara was kind of like that, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Like Castro was not
Mhm.
necessarily wanting him to do all of these adventures in other
Yeah.
places, but
Yeah.
Yeah.
um,
Yeah. Che said he read Stalin because he was a self-described naughty boy, and he liked reading other
yeah,
people
yeah,
that people have told him not to read.
yeah, yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
absolutely. Oh yeah, so now there's the really brutal. Um,
Mm.
I guess it just gets more and more brutal,
Yeah.
but arc 3 is the genocide, and the thing is, Mikey, I know that some of it was written before, but I think we're getting now into parts that were written during or in
Quite
2023
possibly. Yeah.
because
There was a
some
writer's
of this
strike
is
that happened in
too on
between.
the nose to be anything but
Yeah.
Palestine
Yeah.
and um there's a couple of lines that just don't even make sense in the story, and
Yeah.
we'll get to them um, when we get the chance. But like this is the one where one of the things I liked about Andor was like if you watch Star Wars: A New Hope and Empire Strikes Back, Return of the Jedi, these white suited um, stormtroopers, they're a joke. Like they miss, they run down the hallway, they miss. They Han
Mhm.
Solo hits them with his blaster. Luke, slices through them like butter. But they're actually terrifying, and you see them here, and they're just totally terrifying. And um,
Yeah.
like again, if the G20 or I was in some of these anti-globalization protests in the 2000s, and like the riot cops and the tear
Yeah.
gas and like um but and then you kind of get it's another one of these scenes. Like in this case, it's a riot, it's a demonstration, but it's
Mhm.
like you can kind of see them setting you up, and you see the cops like
Yeah.
moving in and blocking off the exits. And meanwhile,
Are
Andor
those
has his own totally different mission that he's trying to kill Dedra.
Yeah.
um Yeah.
Well, I'm glad that
Hmm.
you brought up like the G20 protest for several reasons, because like isn't like the whole world is watching like that chant,
Yeah.
like that comes from those
That's
actions,
right.
right? Like,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
in the Gorman protests that eventually turned into an uprising here, like preceding it, someone starts to chant like "We are the Gore." The whole
Yeah.
galaxy is watching, right?
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
galaxy is watching.
Yeah.
But also like I think Andor is such a perfect contrast to the West Wing, I think, in so many ways. But there's that one kind of infamous G20 episode, right, where they're doing like a spin-off of the protests, and then President Bartlett like walks into a room where all the protesters are waiting to like chew him out, and then the doors close behind him, and then the doors open again, and all of the protesters are applauding him as he leaves because he said something so
Mm.
powerful that it now makes them in support of like capitalist globalization. And what's so funny about that, right, is like even like Aaron Sorkin, who is still a great writer despite being a liberal, he couldn't write anything
He
that
couldn't
could
write the
adequately
speech.
sell that.
Hmm.
So
That's
it
right.
had to happen off camera.
Yeah.
And which really kind of like reveals the lie of the liberal project. Like you see the frontiers of how it can be sold in media and propaganda like the West Wing, where you can't even make the best case for a lot of things that the neoliberal project hinges on. And so it has to be conveyed in these high-minded ideals about civility and core competence, and like the types of personalities that come out of the West Wing, and how they're all just trying their best,
Yeah.
and how they
Yeah.
stand for certain things, and how there's certain norms that have to be maintained. Whereas in Andor, they go uncomfortably deep into
Yeah.
like the actual, not just the mechanics of revolution, but the moral justification
Yeah.
for armed revolution. And you really
So,
see that in this Gorman
what did you
arc.
think of Cyril's, what do you call it? Epiphany, Nora?
I mean, I think obviously he was not expecting ex I mean, he's a bureaucrat in the empire, and he had this mission, and yet he couldn't he couldn't wrap his head around how just debased and depraved the empire was behaving on Gorman. Um, I mean, it's too little, too late, obviously for him, but it was interesting to see. I think him like really wrestling with his alliances.
Yeah.
Like he was outraged at his girlfriend Dedra. He's kind of, I guess, I can't remember if he had an argument with his mother about it. I think he did.
Yeah,
Um,
when he knew he was being recorded.
right,
Yeah,
exactly. Um, and
some layers to that.
yeah, definitely. I mean, but it was really interesting, I think, to see how these bureaucrats who are like constructing this narrative that is being, is going to be used to justify the mass slaughter of these people, are so kind of disembodied from it once it's being carried out. And he, was caught in the middle. I mean, he was literally in the middle of it, and
Mm.
wasn't I think he wasn't prepared for the consequences of his own actions. It's kind
Yeah.
of it's kind of
And his
interesting.
obsession with Andor, which was so funny, because there's
Yeah.
two moments like this, right? There's this
Yeah.
thing where he goes and he attacks Andor, and they have this absolutely brutal hand-to-hand fight,
Hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
then somebody kills him. Who kills him? Who kills Cyril?
Rylance, the
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 non-violence guy,
liberal
right?
nonviolence
Yeah.
advocate.
Oh,
So
Yeah,
the
that's
yeah,
non-violence guy
right.
kills Cyril,
Wow.
and then dies himself, I think, in
Yeah.
turn,
no,
right?
he's just left with his blaster.
Oh, okay.
And
Okay.
it's
So
I think
it's
it's kind of implied that everyone on Gorman who doesn't escape dies.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's and yeah, so Cyril, like, this is, I
But
think,
let me say just one,
yeah.
because Andor, the last words that Cyril hears after this lifelong obsession with catching Andor is Andor going, "Who are you?"
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
Cyril gets shot
Exactly. Yeah.
and dies. Oh, it was good.
Yeah.
And just like jumping ahead to the Dedra Luthen confrontation
Mhm.
in the series finale, where Dedra says something like, I've fantasized about this for years, and
Yeah.
I've wondered who you were, or whatever. And Luthen's
Yeah.
like, I've known who you were all along.
Yeah. He was tracking
Yeah.
her the whole time.
Yeah.
How,
Yeah. But
how
also she's
unfair.
like a dime a dozen, right?
Yeah,
Like, she thinks
exactly.
she's
Right.
so unique.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah, just being kind of like underappreciated
Right.
in
Yeah.
the Imperial bureaucracy. Yeah, I think
And she
she
makes all
she
these promises to Cyril, right? Like she's like, we can have a
yeah.
great life if we just like get past this genocide. Like
You just do
Yeah.
this one genocide
just
and
give me
we're
this
done.
one genocide and we'll
Yeah.
have a great life. And it's like that's also
Yeah.
Yeah.
so much of Western, like the
Yeah.
Western elite is just give us this one genocide and
Right.
everything will
Yeah.
be fine.
I would say with Cyril's arc, I have almost no criticisms of this show, but I think it's missing just one scene where he's like in a bar with the Gormans, like having a good time, getting to know them as people, and
Yeah.
like they sang "Master of the House" together.
Yeah, yeah.
And
Because
like,
it's French. Because
yeah,
it's Les
just yeah,
Miserables. Yeah.
yeah,
Javert sings Master of the
yeah.
House. Yeah.
Just yeah, just to give him that complete kind of like view of like Gorman humanity
Yeah.
before
Yeah.
all of the shit hits the fan.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I love that he has his own Javert moment as well, and he meets kind of a similar end. Like
Yeah.
he sort of lets himself be killed,
Yeah. He had no
because
purpose.
yeah, he has no
Yeah.
purpose. Like when he's asked that question, "Who are you?" It's more than just like a huge ego blow,
Yeah.
for what he's identified himself as. It's like a
Yeah.
hunter of this one man, but
Yeah.
it's like he doesn't even know where he stands with relation to the
Right.
rebellion and the empire anymore,
Right.
because he sees the true face of the empire. It
Yeah.
wasn't just law and order, it was like what is required to maintain the imperial law and imperial
Yeah.
order, which is this unprovoked genocide.
But and
As
it is, and it's a genocide, and it's like they're chanting the world is watching or the galaxy's watching, and
Yeah.
it's just
yeah,
like that was so devastating to watch
yeah,
because like the galaxy watched, you know,
Yep.
yeah.
and
And yeah, there's so Wilman's girlfriend, um who
because he
actually
has
is
one
like
on every planet, right? Because this is a new girl, yeah,
yes. Yeah,
I didn't
Drina.
catch that.
Yeah, yeah. And well, what's so sweet, because in the end, like, they are one of the few couples who actually survive, and they
Mm.
get to be together. And like, so it's also really awesome because like she's like a Gorman refugee from like a dead planet, right? But you see her get to be, to survive at least the end of Andor, the series, right? Like to be a part of the revolution that will be able to kind of like get some justice for her and her people. But she has this like just heartbreaking uh monologue, like on the radios, just like
Yeah.
putting out a message to the galaxy, like begging for help. And that was actually the moment where I felt most like, if there was any rewrite to really speak to what's being done and what's happening in Gaza, like this would be it,
Yeah.
like she says things like, we're being destroyed, and she just keeps saying like, can anyone hear me, can anyone hear me, like, will no one help us, and that reminded me in particular, like the first couple months, like uh the doctors who stood in front of a bunch of
Mm.
dead bagged bodies, calling out to the world, or like the I mean there was
Those
that one
kids. Yeah.
children's press conference, right, that will haunt me forever,
Yeah.
where one of their closing lines in English was, like, we are asking you to help us, like we're
Yeah.
calling
We
on you
we
to help
invite
us,
you
we
to protect
we
us, I
invite you
think.
to,
Yeah.
that was, oh
That's
my
what it
god, we
was.
invite you to help us. um and Lord, that's, yeah.
And that was what,
Yeah.
October 2023. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think this was written at that time.
Yeah.
But so then there's kind of like Mon Mothma's story
Yeah, what
culminating around the same time in the Imperial Senate.
she's a silly person, but like
She's a liberal,
this
you
was
know?
Yeah.
this was
Yeah.
all you could have asked. Like you
Yeah.
can't ask someone for more than this, and she's the only one who, I
Yeah.
mean, like overtly did it. So
Yeah.
I give her credit for this.
She's a bourgeois revolutionary, right?
Protect
Yeah.
Like
her,
Yeah.
protect this woman,
she was
protect this
funding the
woman at all costs.
resistance. Yeah. I mean, she wasn't like a Nancy Pelosi or anything, right?
Yeah,
No,
That
no,
no.
no.
was the
No, no.
mask. She was wearing a
There's
Nancy
Yeah.
no
Pelosi
counterpart.
mask behind.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
there's no
Yeah, no,
counterpart
there's
for
no
her.
real world counterpart. Yeah,
No.
and that's
Yeah.
part of what makes this like so hard to watch. I think it's like
Yeah.
this is the West Wing moment to me. It's like,
Yeah,
wow, wouldn't
yeah.
it be nice if there was someone like this? Except what, unlike any character in the West Wing, they're saying something that actually matters,
Yeah.
like actual principles that should be upheld. But I know, Nora,
So
you wanted to read this monologue, so
Yeah.
we
But
could
wait,
just
Justin,
you
what
could
did
read
you
this and
want to
break it
say?
down.
There's two things I wanted to say. One is like that for me, this whole sequence was like I would be shocked if this was written before October
Yeah.
7th, before the
Yeah.
flood, because the stuff she says doesn't make that much sense in the story. Like the way she says genocide, the way they pause and then she
Mhm.
repeats it. And there's another moment, where he's Bail Organa, she's about to go make the speech, and he says next year in Yavin, which also doesn't
Ugh.
really make sense. It doesn't really make sense. And I was just like, Palestine people always say this. Like
Yeah.
we always say next year in Jerusalem. I didn't realize that Jewish people say
It's an
this
old,
too.
yeah, it's an old
So like
Jewish
it's been
tradition. Yeah.
reappropriated by the
Yeah.
movement because I had
Yeah.
heard it as like a Palestine people thing
Yeah.
say.
I mean, but it was, I think, I mean, it was uh, pre-Zionism. It's like,
Yeah, right.
because we're the diasporic people. We're always yearning for the return to, uh, to the Holy Land is wherever we are within ourselves, kind of thing. Before
Yeah.
Zionism completely exploited it, but
Mhm.
yeah.
But like
So
when he
yeah,
said that, me and my spouse, we just looked at each other and we were like,
yeah.
how did what
Next year.
what just happened there? So
Okay, so Mon Mothma's speech. The distance between what is said and what is known to be true has become an abyss. Of all the things at risk, the loss of an objective reality is perhaps the most dangerous. The death of truth is the ultimate victory of evil. When truth leaves us, when we let it slip away, when it is ripped from our hands, we become vulnerable to the appetite of whatever monster screams the loudest. This chamber's hold on the truth was finally lost on the Gorman Plaza. What took place yesterday, what happened yesterday on Gorman was unprovoked genocide. Yes, genocide. And that truth has been exiled from this chamber. And the monster screaming the loudest, the monster we've helped create, the monster who will come for us all soon enough, is Emperor Palpatine.
and that's like there's so much there because it's like the way that the United Nations and the International
Yeah.
Court of Justice and the all the US institutions long since, but like all of these institutions have been completely destroyed
Yeah.
through this genocide. And
Yeah. And Emperor Joe Biden.
yeah, well, I think it's Netanyahu myself. I think the
Oh
emperor
yeah.
is, and I think the empire is headquartered in Israel right now. Not
Yep.
100%.
That's a
but
monster.
like it was so there's so much there, and then it's then like as soon as that ends and while it's happening they're doing cutting to the bad guys trying to cut the speech and
Yeah.
stop the speech from airing, which is also really
Oh,
well
that was
done.
great.
Yeah. It's
But
great.
then we start this rescue sequence, which was really good action.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It was just like really smart. I love like one of my favorite things. What I tried to do in Siege Breakers is like the good guys are smart and the bad guys are smart. I don't like when it's like
Yeah.
Mhm.
really dumb
Mhm.
on one side or the other. And it's
Yeah.
just like if Andor hadn't made those calls, like
Yeah.
like he just shoots that one, and then he goes, anyone else? And
Yeah.
then he goes and he shoots her driver, like,
That's right.
Yeah.
but he doesn't. He's not just running around shooting everybody.
No,
Yeah.
It's a
he has a
couple of
mission. He's
clean
carrying out his
shots.
mission. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Well, I
and
love I love that moment where the other guy who's formerly her closest aide
mhm.
shouts, "She's a rebel spy," because it's
Yeah.
like
Yeah,
that's like just enough to confuse her to,
yeah,
to
Yeah.
be able to be killed by Cassian. Yeah,
yeah,
that was great.
yeah. I mean, that
Great
guy was
improvisation.
awesome. I love that guy.
Oh
That guy who
yeah.
gets fired and he's just like, yeah, she's fired me. She's kind of mad at me,
Yeah.
but like we still have to save her.
He's also
And
part Gorman too.
uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't
Yeah,
catch
there's
that.
a sequence
Yeah.
in where he's recruited, right? He's recruited at that wedding, or has he already
No,
been
no, he
working
was
for her?
already
Okay.
working for her at that wedding. Yeah, I don't know actually. That's a
Yeah,
good
I don't
Hmm.
know either. I think
Yeah.
Luthen might have
Well,
recruited him at that wedding.
yeah, because each arc, it should be noted, it takes place in a single year that
Yeah.
gets closer and closer to BBY 0,
Yeah.
which
Right.
is
When
like
they blow up the
when
Death Star.
yeah, when they blow up the Death Star.
So, um, I like him because it's not about him, Like,
Yeah.
like that a lot of these revolutionaries in this show, like it's not about them. They're
Yeah.
doing
Yeah.
something that's more important than them. But that guy like really exemplifies it. I don't remember his name or anything, but like she
Yeah.
fires him because she discovers he's a Luthen spy, and then he just goes back to Luthen and he's like, okay, so now my mission of protecting Mon Mothma has become slightly more complicated, but like
Yeah.
doesn't change whatsoever. Like not at
Yeah.
all. It's
He still
just
risks
now
his life to protect her.
yeah, like
Yeah.
he's
Yeah.
just like the mission is the same, but she's kind of
Yeah.
pissed off at me now.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
And
it's
when
just
Luthen
very
tells Mon
like
Mothma, like, he saved you more in more ways than you could possibly know,
yeah,
too. So it's just like,
yeah,
oh man, such great backstory
Yeah.
for a
yeah,
character whose name I can't remember.
yeah, exactly.
Well,
Yeah.
Nora, what I mean, so what did you think of this Mon Mothma speech? Because I feel like this is what you've been doing for years on Electronic Intifada. It's like
Yeah. God.
pointing to truth and the
Yeah,
death
and
of truth.
feeling like uh feeling like you're constantly banging your head against the wall. I mean, I don't know. Like, I feel like I'm more of the, the woman at the radio saying like, "Is anybody out there? Is anybody watching? Don't you like?
Mm,
Can't you see what's happening?" Mon Mothma was like, she's the politician who understands that something evil is afoot and she just can't be silent anymore, and she's getting pressure from the rebels to say something, and so she does. I mean, yeah, like she has more of a conscience than anyone like comparable to Nancy Pelosi or any US liberal for sure. um but I think she also hits the point where she's incensed, and so yeah, her speech, I think, was probably the most like honest she's probably ever been. I don't know, like I just kind of get that sense where she's, as a
mm-hmm,
politician, she's kind of reserved, she plays the game, she has liberal or progressive tendencies, but she really likes her place in high society.
mm,
um she so at this point she's pissed, and she knows that she's putting her neck on the guillotine, by saying what everybody knows to be true, but no one else wants to say, or or is in cahoots with the emperor to say that this is the emperor's fire. This is what we have allowed to happen.
mm-hmm,
Yeah, and she knows exactly, the impact that it will have. Um, and I think she kind of hits that turning point where it's like, well, nothing. Maybe this, this can't be what I'm on this planet to, to do in this position as a senator to do, is just to kind of like toe the emperor line anymore. And I mean, it's great. I think she's a really complicated character. She's
mm-hmm,
very I don't know, she's hard to figure out At least for me, I was like, I don't really, I don't really trust her. I don't, she's because she's so secretive and Luthen is constantly, I think, trying to bring out the revolutionary spirit in her, and she's very like hesitant. But I think, yeah, she hits this turning point, this catalyst where she can't stand by any longer passively. So yeah, it's like, all right, good for you, courageous.
If you watch the animated stuff, she's got quite a role, and
Really
she becomes quite a leader actually, and
good,
by the end. So
good for her.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
Arc
no, I, I
four.
I like
Oh,
I like what you mentioned about like in the speech she says what we've allowed, right?
Yeah,
She doesn't
yeah,
exceptionalize Emperor Palpatine.
right,
I think in the ways that people exceptionalize Trump or Netanyahu,
right,
to kind of disguise the systemic nature
yeah,
of the genocide that's currently being carried
yeah,
out in our name. And yeah, I think there's another really
yeah,
masterful instance of Andor writing. um,
yeah,
yeah, for a character who isn't explicitly revolutionary until she's welcomed to the rebellion by
right,
Andor.
right.
But yeah, that leads
so
us into the final arc.
when we go to the final arc, I will say once again, like at the end of season one, like last year when it ended or whenever it was before the genocide, right? That season one
Yeah,
ended.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So I was really worried that they were gonna screw it up, and they were gonna do like the Hunger Games. I think we
mm,
mentioned this in episode one. I was expecting some kind of swerve of like, do you see how when you do good you do bad, or do you
mm,
see how it's all pointless? And they really, really, really did not do that. And I like more than anything in pop culture, like that would have been the temptation to do, and they
yeah,
didn't do that, and that that means a lot to me.
yeah,
So
So,
yeah, the last arc takes place on Yavin, mostly the
mhm,
rebel base, which is now much more established, and Coruscant, as everything's kind of coming apart in terms of Luthen and Clea, who it turns out this whole time was as much a partner in
mhm,
the the operations of Axis as Luthen was. And we get a kind of series of flashbacks between Clea and Luthen, like how they met. Luthen was an Imperial officer who's kind of having a nervous breakdown in his ship
yeah,
as the genocide of Clea's people is being carried out right outside, and she's kind of like hidden behind this grate. And he finds her, and then they go off together to become revolutionaries. And Gilroy noted that like he didn't want this to be some kind of like gross, weird May December type of romance, so he made
yeah,
sure that he was the one who would get to be able to come up with their backstory and how it was not romantic at all, and it was more like a surrogate father to daughter
hmm,
situation. And I think it's played so beautifully by both actors. And and I think it's a really complicated relationship because Luthen is a revolutionary but also, was literally in charge of the massacre of her whole family.
yeah,
And it's played so well by the actress who plays Clea, whose name is escaping me right now. But the actress was talking about like what was, you know the backstory that she had basically created for her performance, because Luthen eventually gets captured by Dedra, which we can circle back to in a minute. But like, he basically like stabs himself and then is taken into like this intensive care unit in this hospital. And then Clea's mission is basically to kill him because he can't survive to be interrogated. And like just the mix of emotions, this actress said like, it's like a real mix between like this hatred that she's been bottling up her whole life of this man, but there's also this incredible tenderness there, and like she very much loves him as like a father. And it's such a powerful scene when she basically
mm,
like turns off um what is essentially like an iron lung, allowing him to breathe. And and yeah, we really get to see like uh certain stages of them coming into revolutionary consciousness together and actually enacting revolution. Like they go to Naboo, which is in
Terrorist
in the
bombing. Yeah.
prequels. Yeah, they terrorist bomb Emperor Palpatine's home planet, which I think is quite powerful symbolically, especially since it's such like a beautiful kind of like Milan style
Hmm.
planet. While they're eating dessert. And yeah, that's a really special moment. But
Um,
yeah,
I will.
what
The
else?
other thing as I was, so Clea has to sneak through this hospital to take Luthen out,
That
and I was,
Dedra has like put on like lockdown. Yeah.
yeah,
Oh no,
and I
no.
was just like,
By
this
then
is
Dedra's been put into like
marginalized by
Oh,
confinement.
space
that's
It's
right. It's the other
spaceless
it's
guy. Yeah.
bureaucrat. Yeah.
Yep.
yeah, it's a fabulous imperial bureaucrat. Um
That's right.
Number
Hirt.
301.
Yeah,
Yurt.
who's put
Yeah.
it on lockdown.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but I was like, wow, this is like a real Jason Bourne kind of sequence where she's like, doing all this that's really, really detailed, sneaking around and everything she does, And then I was like,
Mhm.
oh, Tony Gilroy wrote the Jason Bourne movies.
Yeah.
So, and there was, the sequence where Dedra goes to arrest Luthen also reminded me of, arch Zionist scumbag Quentin Tarantino,
Mm.
the movie about the Nazis where the Nazi goes
Glorious
to,
Bastards.
yeah, that's the one. And then at the beginning he goes to this farmhouse, and there's this whole game where he's pretending that he doesn't know, and the farmer that's hiding the Jewish people in the under the floorboards
Yeah.
pretends that he doesn't know, and they're doing this whole thing. And that was really also really well done in Andor, I thought,
Just burn
where,
the circuit board. But
Yeah.
when you mentioned that though, it actually reminds me of the climactic scene in Michael Clayton,
yes,
where
yes,
Clooney's talking to Tilda Swinton, and this whole
yeah.
time like he's already made the decision
I'm not the
to like
guy
harm
that
her.
you kill.
Yeah,
I'm the
yeah.
guy that you buy. How can you not know which guy I am?
Yeah, such
I
a
have to go
great
back and
movie.
watch that movie.
Yeah,
It's a
but yeah,
doozy.
I love his line about the rebellion's not here anymore, it's flown
Yeah,
away.
you're too
Yeah.
And
late.
I love that because like I think a lot of people misunderstand Luthen's character, especially like non-communists, where it's not that he delights in disposing of people, right? Like he
No.
understands the sacrifice better than anyone
Yeah.
else,
Yeah,
and he doesn't
absolutely.
exceptionalize himself or the people he loves
Yeah,
in
Right.
that calculus, right?
exactly.
He understands that he too, once his operations have been performed, once his mission has been accomplished, that he is equally expendable. And so
Yeah,
like he doesn't see himself as this essential part anymore. He's played his essential role, and
yeah.
the rest of it has been carried off to this other
Well,
resistance planet.
he,
Yeah.
um,
It's like
he,
resistance leaders that we've
yeah,
Yeah,
seen in the last 18 months. Yeah.
that's right. That's right.
yeah,
All of the
yeah,
things they said, like Yahya
Yeah.
Sinwar, who said,
Yeah.
like, I won't bat an eye. And
That's
Yahya
right.
Sinwar was basically a counterintelligence. It's a very similar kind of role
Mm.
as Luthen,
Mm-hmm.
actually, of
yeah.
building up a counterintelligence
Yeah, and
organization.
people like Nasrallah who like live so much of their lives like literally underground.
Yeah.
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 But he,
And sorry, and the
no,
and
no, go
the
ahead.
and the colonial powers still don't understand that
Mhm.
if you assassinate a leader, I mean, they think that the entire movement will collapse if you
Mhm.
assassinate, the leader of Hezbollah or
Mm.
Qassam, or like they
Yeah.
don't understand that that's not how guerrilla resistance, indigenous resistance works.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That they're
And
that it builds it, no matter who's calling the shots. It's like
But
it's
there
and
there.
what's
was a,
interesting
there,
about
oh,
this
sorry.
is like the sorry to interrupt, but like the seeds of this are all in the original Star Wars, right?
Mm,
Yeah,
Like
absolutely.
this is the subtext behind Obi-Wan. It's not that Obi-Wan's gonna come back as a force ghost. What he's actually saying when he says,
Mhm.
if strike me down and I'll become more powerful than you could ever imagine, he's
mhm.
talking about the resistance, right?
Yeah,
Like where it's like you know, shoot coward, you're only killing a
Yeah,
man, right? Where
yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah.
it's it,
Exactly.
and Luthen mentions this, I think, in season one, where he says oppression breeds rebellion, right? where
hmm
Yeah,
where you if you kill one of these beloved figures, it's only going to come
yeah,
yeah.
back at you a thousandfold, and that's what
yep,
we've seen. Like
yeah.
Israel hasn't eliminated Hamas. They've doubled
Yeah.
militant resistance ranks in Gaza.
Yeah.
So
There was a video I saw about like why Dedra miscalculated in doing this raid, because it led really to her downfall. She ends her
yeah,
the
Yeah.
story in prison, because she was so overzealous and overconfident. Um, but it was like one of the things that this guy said. He's, I think it's like Star Wars analyst, or anyway, it was a pretty, it's 70,000 views or something already. But he was like, she didn't understand that, because she's talking about how disgusting he is to her and how he wants chaos for everybody but himself. And the analyst was just like, she didn't understand. Luthen is one of the most selfless characters, you know,
Yeah.
yeah,
in ever written. And like, you don't really like the things he's going around doing, don't that's not the first word you would think of when you think of
Yeah.
him, but it's true. Like, he's
yeah,
just he's just turned around and just quietly killing himself because
Yeah.
yeah,
he's like, okay,
yeah.
well,
Yeah, she didn't know that he wasn't looking for exits, right?
yeah,
He was,
yeah.
Right.
or just one particular exit, right?
Right.
But
And
he,
well, also I think like on Dedra's side, like her downfall is her ego, right?
yeah,
Where she went around protocols because
yeah,
she wanted to make the arrest
yeah.
herself, and that was
But
her
he
downfall.
handed her the knife. Somebody was like, he handed her the knife, and that also puts her fingerprints on the knife that kills him. Right? Like, I didn't
Oh
even
Oh,
think
yeah,
of that.
interesting. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
he's
yeah,
doing so much 5D chess here. Like,
yeah,
he's now like, he's basically setting her up as maybe she's a spy,
Yeah.
which is what leads to her
Yeah.
downfall too, right? It's like, why did you break protocol to come here? Why are your fingerprints on the knife that killed him? What really happened in this room? Like,
Yeah.
you know, um,
yeah.
That's awesome.
so pretty amazing. And you know what I liked was after all of this Jason Bourne thing, and they rescue Clea, which was very cool. Andor's investment in in that robot definitely paid off.
K2SO.
There
Okay.
Yeah,
was no way
Totally.
out for him
No.
except for that. But then they really let it breathe. Like, they have like long drinking scenes, right? Like, he
mm-hmm.
has a drink with Val, he has a drink with,
Mm-hmm.
or Val has a drink with Mothma,
Yeah,
um, and they just kind of let it end in a slow way a little bit, and I thought that was really nice.
yeah.
What
And
else? Anything else, you
so
guys?
I think well, Partagaz offs himself,
Yeah,
and I think
that
in
was
a
really
and
good too. He was a
really
good
well done
character.
scene.
Yeah.
But we hear him listening to Nemec's manifesto,
Hmm.
and which basically implies that it's yeah it's
It's gone
circulated
viral.
the
Yeah.
entire galaxy. It's gone viral. Yeah, and I think he really sees in that moment that the revolution is basically inevitable, and he's
Yeah.
fixed his whole life on trying, like Dedra and all of these other imperial administrators, trying to pin down the resistance to kind of like this single head that they could cut off, right?
Mhm.
And he
Mm.
slowly realizes in that moment that yeah, it's just going to keep branching off and growing new cells, right?
And like,
Splintering off.
he's a pretty good manager, right? Like,
Yeah, yeah,
he's a pretty good manager. Like, he knows this team, he knows what they're good at, he knows when to push them, he knows when to encourage them and tell them to back off,
yeah.
and you know.
Well, let's see. I think there's one other moment. Oh, Nora, did you have something?
No, no, no. Go ahead.
Well, I think one of my favorite moments, besides the very last shot, which I just, oh man, I was just like sobbing
Yeah.
at the end of it. But like uh there's the montage, right, where we see a lot of characters kind of closing out their stories, leading directly into Rogue One, the film. Uh there's a shot of her name is Elizabeth Lau playing Clea. She wakes up after a really hard night, where Vel brings her back in from the rain. Um, and Clay's like waking up to like life on Yavin.
Mm.
And this is after, before she left Coruscant, and like while she was on Yavin, like she was like, everyone hates us, everyone hates Luthen. They don't understand like what we've done, like that without our work, this revolution and Yavin would not have been possible, right? and she's just feeling really down on herself, feeling, very unsupported, basically, um, and burned by the very people, she helped turn into revolutionaries. And yeah, she's waking up to just kind of like the hustle and everyday bustle of like revolutionary activity, and you see this like the faintest smile come across her face, and like I think that's another kind of like ego destroying moment where
Mm.
she comes to terms with the fact that she's never going to get any credit or appreciation for any of the uncountable sacrifices she's made, all the uncountable major contributions she's made to make this movement possible, to bring it to where it is, to basically help to uh mother this revolution into being, right? But she's fine with that, because what she remembers, I think what she actually cares about is that the revolution happens, that it comes into being successfully. And I think that's like I think like one of the most important reminders for any revolutionary, or for, I mean, honestly, like any human being, is that like ego death is necessary, absolutely necessary, before you can accomplish like really anything of lasting importance or value. And yeah, that was my takeaway from it.
Mm.
But yeah.
And then we get to see Bix holding her and Cassian's baby.
I asked
Yeah.
Mikey this offline. Do you think Bix had to leave him? Do you think Bix had to leave Andor?
I do. I
Yeah.
I do, because I think Cassian, Cassian was always like the reluctant revolutionary, like we talked about in for the season 1 episode. But like I I think he was getting to the point where he was getting tired. Um, he really just wanted to be somewhere safe with Bix, and Bix, having true revolutionary spirit, knew that in order for Cassian to accomplish his missions, that he had to go it alone until, what does she say, like until our job is done, or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
um and then, me being like the hopeless romantic, I was like, well, she has a baby, and they basically accomplished what they can accomplish. So, Cassian has, I can't remember what happens in Rogue One.
He
I can't
dies.
remember if, does he?
He dies. He
Yeah.
gets
There goes
vaporized.
that. Yeah,
Yeah, by the
great.
Death Star.
But maybe before that happens, he's able to come
No,
back
no,
and
no,
help raise the kid and
no,
see
no.
Biggs again.
There's no
God
gap. He
damn
just
it,
Yeah.
goes. You're
He
Justin.
gets like
actually,
one last phone call.
you
God
know when
damn it.
he's walking, Nora. He's walking to that ship. He's walking
Yeah.
right into Rogue One.
Oh, God
There's
damn
no
it.
gap. No,
Yep.
he's
Yep.
just. Yeah,
Well,
sorry about that.
hopefully
Oh.
Bix and her fellow comrades can raise the baby as Cassian would have liked.
Yeah, yeah,
There we
And
go.
we were all in agreement that part of what factored into Bix's decision is that she knew she was pregnant, right,
yeah.
before she left
That's
him.
right.
That's
That's
part of
right.
why.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, it's just another example of how great the show is. It's never explicitly stated that
Yeah.
that's a
But you
major part of the
guys,
reason.
Yeah.
Yeah.
if it's gonna be a generation long battle,
Mhm.
then there is not gonna be when our job is done. So
Yeah.
like
They immediately try to build another Death Star in Return of the
yeah.
Jedi.
Oh, God,
Yeah.
that's right. They
But they blow that
started
up too.
working
So
on it.
there.
Yeah. Yeah. There we go.
With Ewoks and
Oh, that was.
stuff.
I still think it's one of the most underrated of the Star Wars movies. I think the Ewoks
Yeah,
are
it was
good.
very satisfying. It was a very
Yeah.
satisfying thing. To see
They're so
Luke and
cute.
yeah.
Yeah.
All right, guys.
Well, thank you guys. This
That
was
was
this was
cathartic.
fun. This was a good a
Yep.
good a good break from the usual
Yep.
grind.
Always fun to
Speaking
talk
of
about
the
the best show
grind,
ever
Yeah.
made.
Yeah.
let's do a Trinity of Fundamentals thing
I
sometime.
love it. I'll have to
Yeah.
finish reading it.
Yeah, I haven't finished
Yeah.
it either. I
Okay.
actually got stuck when he broke up with his girlfriend. I was like, oh man,
Oh.
give love a
Yeah.
chance, Wasim Rafidi. And then I stopped. I stopped reading it.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Let's do it
Well,
again.
yeah, I guess that's it, huh?
Yeah, I mean, it
So we'll do
was,
another one of these films or TV shows too.
Yeah.
but yeah, like Luthen, Mon Mothma, Andor, Bix, um, Saw, just a whole bunch of really great
Yeah.
characters, really great
Yeah.
creations.
I think what it does really well is you get to see the evolution of revolution.
Mm.
Where yeah, and I think that's why the Maya Pay Brigade is so important. Yeah, and the beginnings of Andor is just kind of a merc who hates the Empire but doesn't have a clear vision is so
Yeah,
important to telling this story, because I think one of the theses of this show is that like what's required of revolution is like a clear vision, a clear political project with clear objectives,
yeah,
discipline,
yeah,
and camaraderie and community, right? And
yeah,
that lacking any one of those things, you will have maybe an honorable rebellion that people will write songs about, but not a successful revolution.
Mm.
And you have to be willing to give up everything, including even people remembering you or what you
yeah,
contributed, in order for you to have any meaningful contribution to that revolution. And I think the one thing I will say about Rogue One, uh I think the best part of Rogue One is when Darth Vader appears at the very end, but not because of Darth Vader's appearance, which is admittedly very cool, but the fact that you see all of these anonymous rebel fighters handing over what is basically a floppy disk
yeah,
back and forth to other people, just kind of like tossing it over, squeezing it through these
yeah,
barely
Mm.
open doors, just being like, this is so important, it's more
yeah,
important than my life, hand it over, you know.
yeah,
And just like knowing like in real revolutions just how many countless people there are
yeah,
where their biggest contribution is just like handing over that information is,
yeah,
yeah, I think a real testament to Rogue One and to this entire series, where there's all these little people who don't even have names, sometimes they don't even have lines, but you
yeah,
know that they've contributed something without which the destruction of the Empire is impossible. And I just think that's what makes this show so
Great.
powerful.
most
Thanks,
definitely.
guys.
Yep. May the force be with you.
Oh,
Ah,
there you
you got it
go.
that time.
Now you can cut.